Metal Gear Solid is the title that spawned one of the most beloved franchises in greater gaming history. And I don't attribute that, as some might, to the novelty found in its boss fights or its innovative stealth-based gameplay. I think what gives this game, and the first 3 games in the series, their identity is the atmosphere. And of course its lovable action movie protagonist. Now that's the face of a real man. The game takes place entirely inside of an enemy fortress, the now legendary Shadow Moses Island. Basically a top-secret nuclear research facility and its resident superweapon have been repurposed by terrorists for nefarious terrorist uses, and you are the main character in a video game. Needless to say, they don't stand a chance. The island is located in Alaska, so you're in for a lot of visually pleasing color palettes and pixelated snow, which I don't know about you, but is all I really want in a PlayStation 1 game. That's real Alaska, by the way, not a fantasy realm of the same name. I think it's a huge positive for the atmosphere that we're somewhere isolated, but very grounded and somewhat realistic. We're playing in our world after all, and it takes place fairly close to our time. All the science fiction aspects are explained as being top secret technology, which for the setting works great. The cold polygonal sights are neat and all, but I also really appreciated the many impressive sounds. The score sets a great tone and establishes a slow, pleasant sneaking about pace. Unless of course you're spotted, then the game tries to induce upon you the most severe and guilt-ridden of anxiety attacks. Also worthy of note, the operatic vocals found in the sadder or more epic of times stand out in my mind from most other PS1 games I've played. There are dozens of other great examples of sound design way ahead of its time, and when you combine the industrial frozen landscape with those many well thought out little contextually activated sound effects and passively looping background noises, you get a game that oozes with atmosphere. And a little of that atmosphere contains nuclear radiation. The game's flirtation with being a PSA about the dangers of nuclear proliferation might be one of the reasons it was so hard for me to get into back when it was released in 1998. It's one of the greatest regrets of my gaming life, but I kinda can't blame my child self. The themes of genetic predisposition and nuclear deterrence might have been a bit beyond my 5-year-old understanding. I was too busy with things like the first Final Fantasy and Duck Hunt for the NES, maybe even Blue version for my Game Boy Pocket, but I don't remember perfectly well because I was 5 and this is irrelevant. I will forever regret that I didn't get to experience this story and its graphics at a time where I would have been less critical about the things that haven't aged as well. Chief among which, in my mind, is the dialogue. While not as bad as some of the anime I watched in the 90s, it could use some love and care. And a remake, like a AAA modern-day Twin Snakes sort of a situation. Things come off as being a bit wonky, poorly written, and cheesy beyond reason at times, but if you're willing to put that aside and be grateful that it's fully voiced and had a localization team at all, you'll see this game has a lot of heart. The main and only playable character is known by his codename, Solid Snake. Yeah, I know. I'll give you a minute. Moving along, Snake is overly serious, gives weird sage advice, and has already gone through multiple character arcs in the previous series of games I had intended not to acknowledge. I know nothing of the first 2 Metal Gear games and would like to go back to pretending they don't exist now so that I don't have to play them, and also so that continuity isn't a disaster. While Snake is, in my mind, the most likable and memorable, there are plenty of other great characters present.
What's wrong? Getting all friendly all of a sudden.
No, nothing. I'm glad you're okay.
Otacon, your best friend and consummate weeb, the many advisors you can call at any time via codec, and even a cyborg ninja who is apparently from one of the aforementioned non-existent games. But I'm still a big fan. I would go as far as to argue that every stealth game should have at least one cyborg ninja.
And Japanese cartoons played some part in that?
They did.
Every Metal Gear Solid title, save for 5 sadly, has had its own unique set of zany villains, each with their own abilities and specialties. Some even need to be dealt with in specific ways that might have been really tough to figure out pre-internet. Having a small number of iconic boss fights to bookend each of these stealth and or backtracking and or cutscene sections is an excellent way to break up the pacing, which would otherwise be really slow. I assume a lot of people looking back could still remember the names of these 6 enemies better than you do some of the main characters in games you've played since. And spoilers for a game that came out in 1998, one of them dies before you even realize you've met him. But it's just that type of game. If you go in expecting action, I think you'll be impressed with the game's stealth mechanics and overwhelming number of options and choices in terms of equipment. If you go in expecting text boxes and grunting noises, you'll be impressed with its various weird but substantial cutscenes. There's something for everyone. It's sorta anime, it's sorta military, it's sorta sneaky, and it's got these white transitional cuts that sometimes don't even jump to a new scene, they just sorta happen, like seemingly for no reason at all. Playing in 2020, you might feel a few things haven't aged well, especially aiming using the D-pad. I don't mind having to hold then release square to fire the pistol, but not being able to aim down sights after playing MGS2 is very painful. Like I mentioned earlier, there's also a lot of backtracking, I'm assuming due to technical or time limitations. But in some cases I actually feel like that lack of technology and or time informed the construction of the game world for the better. The limited number of environments means each one was more carefully crafted. There are occasionally secret areas, lots of optional locked doors you can go back to later, and as always in a Kojima game, lots of interesting little Easter eggs. I think all that concentration and focus could only be afforded to each area of Shadow Moses because of its linearity and lack of too many large open spaces, which wouldn't have been too much fun anyway, to be honest, because of the top-down camera. That's one thing from the olden days I will never miss: lack of camera control. None of that is to say I don't recommend you still give this game a try for the first time or go back to it in 2020. There just may be a small, uncomfortable barrier of entry in the beginning.
Snake, answer me! Snake! Snake!
But if you can get past the more dated feeling aspects and just enjoy this spy movie that becomes a murder mystery, that becomes a 6-episode anime arc, I think it's absolutely possible that love for this game can still bloom on the battlefield. P.S. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. This whole series is great and I highly recommend you play or replay any and all of it. I intend to make a video about each game in the future, but hopefully a bit farther in the future when my videos suck less. And again, thanks.